So I can only speculate on what Joe Biden's true intentions are here. I don't actually think that he wants to increase the minimum wage to $15 an hour. I think that he only made this promise on the campaign trail because if he didn't promise at least a $15 an hour minimum wage, he wouldn't have been viable during the Democratic Party primary. So I think he probably just said what he needed to say to advance. But now you can tell that he's looking for any excuse he can possibly find to not fight for the $15 an hour minimum wage. I mean, even before the Senate parliamentarian made her recommendation, he was already privately signaling to governors that he wasn't going to have the votes needed to pass the $15 an hour minimum wage. But now, since the Senate parliamentarian is saying we can't pass this using budget reconciliation, he is basically throwing up his hands and saying, well, that's it. I mean, we tried, but it's all over now, folks. My hands are tied. The Senate parliamentarian, an unelected person, has spoken, and this individual alone is overriding me, the president of the United States. It's just ridiculous. And it's not an excuse that voters of the Democratic Party are going to accept come 2022. But thankfully, there are individuals who are elected to Congress that are actually willing to fight. One of them, of course, is Senate Budget Committee Chairman Bernie Sanders, who is pledging to force a vote on the $15 an hour minimum wage. And he's saying, we're going to ignore the Senate parliamentarian. So as Alexander Bolton of The Hill reports, Sanders on Monday declared he would not back down on his signature wage initiative after Senate parliamentarian Elizabeth McDonough ruled last week that a provision setting the minimum wage at $15 an hour would not be eligible under special budget rules Democrats are using to avoid a filibuster while passing their coronavirus relief bill. My personal view is that the idea that we have a Senate staffer, a high-ranking Senate staffer, deciding whether 30 million Americans get a pay raise or not is nonsensical. We have got to make that decision, not a staffer who's unelected. So my own view is that we should ignore the rulings, the decision of the parliamentarian, Sanders told reporters. Sanders said he will force a vote on an amendment raising the federal minimum wage this week. And that right there is exactly what I want to see. I want to see leftist members of Congress actually fight. Because to just accept that there's nothing left that can be done is absolutely preposterous. I think that David Sirota made a phenomenal point in a new article for the Daily Poster. He said that these issues, historically, whatever a president is choosing to focus on, like that really determines whether or not that issue lives or dies. Presidents alone can use their bully pulpit to elevate the salience of particular issues, determine how important that issue is. So if Joe Biden doesn't think a federal minimum wage increase of $15 an hour is important, he could just lose interest in it and that issue would die because the president is choosing to move away from that. So we can't let that happen, and that means you have to keep the pressure on, but not just in the Senate. In the House as well. And I think that elected members of Congress in the House, namely members of the Squad and newest members, they are not backing down here. And as Hannah Trudeau of the Daily Beast reports, minutes after the Senate parliamentarian advised against keeping the proposed $15 minimum wage hike in the American Rescue Plan, key House Democrats formed a group chat over text message to discuss tactics for pressuring President Joe Biden to keep his crucial campaign pledge. On Friday evening and into the weekend, prominent progressives took to cable news to criticize what they considered to be a bureaucratic hurdle to moving the country past stagnantly low wages. Senator Bernie Sanders, the chairman of the Senate Budget Committee, told CNN's Anderson Cooper that the decision was upsetting. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said on Mehdi Hasan's inaugural segment on MSNBC that they should override the parliamentarian, asserting that constituents and people across this country put Democrats in power to raise the baseline wage. After a weekend of activity, Ro Khanna sent a one-page letter with 22 Democrats early on Monday, including those involved in the text exchange, and other top members like Ocasio-Cortez, to Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, calling on them to refute McDonough's recommendation. Overruling the parliamentarian would go against long-standing Senate norms, but it is not without precedent. Khanna's letter cites a moment when in 1967, former Vice President Hubert Humphrey bucked the rules authorities' guidance to reduce the filibuster threshold from 2/3 of those present to 3/5, among other instances. Some progressives are now turning their attention specifically towards Harris to do so, who could ultimately overturn McDonough's stance. And this is exactly what I want to see. And I think that focusing their attention on Kamala Harris specifically is really important because Kamala Harris, she's always tried to pretend as if she's more progressive than other corporate Democrats, but in actuality, she's not. She is someone who is a neoliberal corporate Democrat. She backed away from Medicare for All. She has a history of jailing poor black and brown folks for not sending their kids to school or smoking weed. So this individual, if she truly wants anyone to think that she's actually a progressive and not a fraud, now is the time to put up or shut up. Use the power that you have to override the Senate parliamentarian. And if you don't act here, you're telling us that you don't actually support a $15 an hour minimum wage. You're telling us that when you run in 2024 or 2028, anything that you say is bullshit because whatever you run on, that's just campaign promises that you will abandon the minute it becomes politically expedient or convenient. You'll use any excuse imaginable. So keeping the pressure on them is absolutely key in this moment. Because again, if Joe Biden chooses to give up on this issue, then as the president, what he says usually goes. So we can't let that happen. We have to maintain pressure and we have to make sure that elected progressives do not stop fighting. Because the minute they accept Joe Biden's lame excuses that, oh, I can't pass this because the Senate parliamentarian said so, that's when this issue dies. So progressives like Bernie Sanders and the squad, they have to keep this alive. And I'm glad that that's what they're doing.